Conflict on a team is a certainty, but navigating that conflict successfully on your team, well, that's still uncertain. Hey leader, David Burkus here, organizational psychologist and author of 5 best-selling books on helping leaders and teams do their best work ever. And whether that team is in a corporate boardroom or startup garage, a co-working space, or even an arch villain's super secret lair, those teams are gonna have conflict. Conflict is inevitable on a team. Why? Teams are composed of people, and people come with different perspectives, different lived experiences, different knowledge, skills, and abilities, and that means conflicting perspectives and conflicting solutions. And so part of your job as a leader is always going to be to manage conflict. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. Conflict happens because of those different perspectives, but it's because of that conflict that we're able to see our blind spots, that we're able to look at lots of different possible solutions, that we're able to find innovative new ways to do things. We need conflict on a team. We just need it to A, stay task focused, and B, be properly managed. And so in this episode, we're gonna talk about 5 tactics that you can implement with your team when there's conflict. Whether or not it hits that specific conflict kind of depends on the tactic, but that's why we're giving you all 5 to help you better manage conflict on a team and turn conflict into something that helps your team grow and get better. Conflict is inevitable, but navigating that conflict is uncertain. At the end of this video though, you might be a bit more certain about how to turn conflict into collaboration. So the first tactic to manage conflict on a team is to find the root cause. Conflict happens usually because there are conflicting ideas about the best way to go about something. There's a problem and we have conflicting ideas about the solutions. There's a set of resources and they're finite and we have conflicting ideas about how best to spend them. In any case, what we're doing essentially is we're trying to solve a problem and we're arguing about the potential solutions to that problem. And sometimes the whole reason we're arguing is that we haven't fully examined the root cause. So before we get into generating different possible solutions and arguing over who's right, let's find some common ground around the root cause. This may be having to draw up a classic fishbone diagram or ask the 5 whys to analyze it, but it just might be thinking a bit deeper about what led us to the situation that we were in. And again, as we have that conversation, the goal is to get everyone in agreement about the root cause of the problem. We'll talk about solutions later, but we want to come to common ground around that idea. We can all agree that the problem was triggered here, or we can all agree that the problem flows from this. What that does is that defines some terms, and it'll help lead us to the second tactic, which is going to help us define success. Again, all of this done before we look at solutions. So after we find the root cause, the second tactic to managing conflict on a team is to define acceptable criteria. Okay, we're in agreement about how we got to now, about how we got to the problem that we're facing. Let's talk about the criteria with which we will define a successful solution to that problem. Let's set the frame in which the picture has to go in. And you might think this is a little weird. Why would we talk about constraints this early? Well, sometimes the source of our conflict when we get there to talking about possible solutions isn't that we have all of these different ideas. It's that we disagree about the importance of our criteria for success. We disagree about how long it should take to implement the idea or how much it should cost or who's responsible for it. So we need to set that criteria ahead of time and come to sort of a group definition of what success looks like. And when we do that, truthfully, a lot of times the solution becomes obvious. But even so, if we have differing solutions, that's okay. We have other tactics to manage that conflict, but we're gonna get at a more peaceful, task-focused solution because we did the work ahead of these conflicting ideas, not only in finding the root cause, but in defining that criteria. So the third tactic for managing conflict on a team, and this really happens when we start to have conflict over those solutions, or when we start to have conflict over who's supposed to have what resource, and that is to question assumptions. Right? We agree on the root cause, we agree on the criteria for success, but there are still a lot of assumptions about the world around us, about our own individual capacities, about what the team can take on. There's all sorts of assumptions behind our solution. And so what we want to do if we're in conflict is we never want to put down an individual person. That turns task-focused conflict into personal conflict, and that's always going to be negative. But we don't want to criticize their idea or question their idea right away. Their idea is logical. Their idea is probably their best work, and so we don't want to shoot it down right away. What we want to do is try and understand how they got to that idea. We do that by questioning assumptions. Instead of saying that'll never work because it's too expensive, we might say, hey, okay, what are your thoughts? It's a cool solution. What are your thoughts on how much it'll cost? Instead of arguing and telling someone we can't do that because we need to implement this a lot faster than your plan will work, maybe we say, hey, what are your thoughts about how long it would take to implement that, or about how many man hours or team hours we have to contribute to that solution? Those are assumption questions. And as we question those assumptions, people might change or think further through their solutions, or might find out that our assumptions are wrong. Maybe their assumptions are right. It actually doesn't matter. What matters is we thought deeper about each solution, given everyone the space to be heard about all their different solutions, and we're arriving at a resolution because we're finding common ground in the underlying assumptions about a solution as well. But sometimes, even when you question the assumptions are sound, but the person's final conclusion is ridiculous. Look, it happens. And again, it's important here, we still don't want to question the idea or criticize the idea or the person. And so what we do here is we examine the impact. That's the fourth tactic for managing conflict on a team. People have conflicting ideas about the right solution. Let's think down the road. We implemented your idea. What's the impact? What's the impact on other divisions in our organization? What's the impact on clients? What's the impact on society? How's the media going to respond? There's all sorts of impact questions you can ask where we start to dream up. We've implemented this. Hey, let's assume it worked. What are the unintended consequences? It's foolishness to believe that every solution is going to be devoid of down the road problems. Every solution is a trade-off between the urgency and the importance of the current problem and hopefully a new set of problems that are less urgent, less important. And over time we refine and we make things better. But there's no one-size-fits-all, never going to be conflict again solution we can come up with. So we examine the impact, and in doing so, maybe that person starts to realize, oh, okay, maybe my idea isn't the best one because I wasn't thinking about all of those things. Examine the impact. And the fifth and final way to manage conflict on a team, if questioning assumptions and examining the impact and having all the common ground before our discussion doesn't work, is to switch your perspective. Yeah, switch the perspective. And what I mean here is ask people to pick up the other one's glasses. Not literally, that could cause all sorts of headaches and blurred vision and what have you. But I mean, pick up their perspective, their way of seeing the world. Literally have people switch teams. Sometimes when I'm working with teams and we've narrowed it down to 3 or 4 possible solutions and everyone has certain champions beside it, I'll ask people to write a name for each solution on a big piece of paper, put them in 3 different places in the room, and then ask people to go buy their chosen solution and then switch and start thinking about the ways someone else's solution would work, right? And then maybe even start thinking about the ways their solution wouldn't work. Now you're on the other team, right? Switch your perspective around the idea. Maybe you switch your perspective from you to your client or an external stakeholder. But often when there's conflict on a team, because we're literally not seeing eye to eye, and that means we need to switch our perspective, see things as the other person championing that idea that we thought was ridiculous, and then start to find the ways that that is actually a logical idea. Maybe by the end of doing that experience or that experiment, you end up finding the perfect solution. But even if you don't, you end up having a much calmer, much more creative, and ultimately much more successful conversation because you've gained empathy for the other conflicting perspectives on the team. And as I said at the top, these are not going to resolve conflict on a team. These are not going to result in a solution that just ends all conflict. That's never going to happen. The only way you'll never have conflict on a team is if everyone in your team literally thinks alike 100% of the time, in which case most of them aren't necessary. We want conflicting ideas, we want different perspectives, and that means we need to learn how to manage conflict, how to keep it task-focused, how to keep it respectful, and how to keep it moving our team toward more positive solutions. Solutions that result in better performance, solutions that result in a more engaging work experience, and solutions that create a team where everyone feels like they can do their best work ever. Oh, and one more thing. If you're still a little doubtful on this whole conflict can be positive thing, I got you, I understand. So I invite you to switch your perspective and maybe hear out my argument a bit more. Check out this video right here on the surprising benefits of conflict on a team.